time has expired. Senator Ludlam.
Thanks, Mr Deputy President. Well, it was fascinating sitting in and listening to Senator Cormann lecturing the government on a tax that doesn't collect any money from the party, and I suspect Senator Joyce will serve it up as well in a few minutes, from a party that didn't want to tax the industry at all. So the net result of following coalition policy would actually have been no tax taken either. So it's remarkable to hear the coalition trying to have it both ways. Do you want to levy fair taxes upon this industry, or do you not? I am keenly aware, as a senator representing Western Australia, the role that the mining industry plays in the Western Australian and the national economy, and I'm also keenly aware that people employed directly by the mining sector are actually a very small fraction of the West Australian workforce. And for those not on a mining wage, the mining boom has actually come at a severe cost, and people bandy the term two-speed economy around here on the East Coast without, I think, really appreciating what the impacts are on the front line in Western Australia, or more specifically on towns in the goldfields in the Pilbara. The high exchange rate associated with the mining boom has seen trade-exposed sectors right around the country, including manufacturing, tourism and education, finding it much harder to compete. The boom has obviously also driven up the costs of operating a business, or a farm for that matter. In August of last year, ASIC reported a 17.4% increase in the annual number of failed businesses in Western Australia. The boom has driven up, as well as the cost of business, the cost of living. House prices in WA have exploded over the last decade, and rents continue to soar. Between May 2006 and March 2008, the RBA increased official interest rates 7 times, and on each occasion, high or rising commodity prices was explicitly mentioned as a factor. So the question that we would put is, what is the best way to ensure that Australians benefit from the boom, a boom built on the liquidation of finite resources? While the company tax rate is 30%, the average rate paid by the mining industry in 2008-09 was just under 14%, mostly because of generous deductions available to the industry. For example, we cop their diesel bill. Taxpayers subsidise the diesel bill of mining companies. In 2009, Andrew Forrest's FMG admitted that it hadn't paid a cent in company tax in 7 years of operation. So on 7th of March this year, Treasury Secretary Martin Parkinson observed that mining companies account for about a fifth of gross operating surplus, yet only around a tenth of company tax receipts. So it's in this context that the federal government introduced a mining tax that failed to raise a single dollar in revenue in its first quarter of operation. And the failure of the mining tax to raise any revenue at all demonstrates the folly of Labor's capitulation to the big 3 mining companies. The Henry Tax Review made the case for a 40% tax on mining profits above $50 million a year. Labor allowed themselves to be bullied by the mining industry, cheered on by their ever faithful servants in the coalition, and watered the tax down to 22.5% on profits above $75 million, and then radically reduced the number of commodities that it applied to. The original Henry tax, designed by Treasury, would have stemmed some of the flow of mining profits out of the country, but the government blew it. And having watered down the tax in response to an entirely misleading and aggressive $22 million propaganda campaign, and only applying it to these 2 commodities, the scale of the government's surrender is now apparent. The coalition, of course, performed its usual role as the uncritical sock puppets for the big mining companies, and have demonstrated a kind of economic illiteracy of the highest order, opposing any kind of tax whatsoever on mining super profits, and making the kind of hysterical doomsday predictions that Tony Abbott, the leader of the opposition, has made something of an art form, and they've been proved completely dishonest time and again. Now, a big wind turbine is 200 tonnes of steel. Solar PV cells require rare earths and silicon. Electric vehicles require high-capacity lithium batteries. So it's not possible to do these things without mining, and the myth that Greens are opposed to mining per se is obviously absurd. What we do object to is the idea that because of its financial clout, the mining industry should be entitled to throw its political weight around like some kind of cartel, dodge fair taxation, and punch holes in environmental protection and heritage laws built up painstakingly over a period of decades. Government annual resource reports indicate that we have 8 or 9 decades more of iron ore mining at present rates of extraction, another 80 years or thereabouts. Now, this caveat, at present rates of extraction, is critical. None of the proponents in the Pilbara or the North West Shelf or in the goldfields or anywhere else have any intention whatsoever of proceeding at present rates of extraction, and their shareholders would sack them if they did. The mining industry and the oil and gas industry intends to double rates of extraction across the board as soon as possible, and that, of course, halves the depletion horizon. The boom is coming to an end one way or another, but we've been hypnotised by the laws of supply and demand and the powerful magic of price signals to believe that it can last forever. The mining boom won't last forever. Geology says otherwise, and geology will win. We must therefore make the most of the boom while it lasts. A properly constructed super profits tax would have raised funds for hospitals, healthcare, better public transport, affordable housing, a large-scale investment in renewable energy that we so desperately need, training facilities and, for example, much-needed support for the nation's schools documented in the Gonski Review. A properly constituted and levied mining tax that only kicks in when the industry is doing exceptionally well and harvesting super profits would lay the foundations of a sovereign wealth fund to lock in the benefit of the finite boom for future generations, as other more foresighted countries, for example Norway, have done from the once-in-a-generation benefits of a commodities boom. And instead the government has wasted almost 2.5 years since Treasury first advocated a mining super profits tax, or longer than that now. A strong mining super profits tax could have fostered the diversification of the West Australian economy by funding training and R&D and start-up grants to small businesses. But instead, Western Australia's AAA credit rating is in peril because of our narrow economic base, because of our dependence on mining, and because of the tunnel vision of the major political parties. The Coalition, of course, has approached this debate as though mineral resources belong to Clive Palmer and Gina Rinehart as some kind of birthright. Labor members have noted in this place that Australia's mineral resources belong to all of us by way of being the property of the Crown. And what is almost ignored is that these minerals are coming from country. They come from Aboriginal land. And in Canberra, thousands of kilometres from the West Pilbara, Parliament debates how to share the bounty from a once-in-a-lifetime mining boom, and in the case of the Coalition, obviously not wanting to share the bounty of the boom at all, while traditional owners and Aboriginal people of these exploited lands live in conditions of degrading poverty in the midst of a mining boom. Every Australian should be benefiting from our publicly owned mineral resources, especially those in need. And it hasn't been lost on the Greens that some of the worst and most destructive poverty in this country occurs side by side within a stone's throw of some of the most lucrative extractive industry developments in the world. It's not too late to reconstitute this tax. It wouldn't be too late, and the Greens stand ready to work with the government, or heaven forbid the opposition if they have a change of heart, to fix the tax, to harness the boom and to make it work for all Australians, this once-in-a-generation opportunity. Or we can continue to let the mining industry rip a fortune out of this country, liquidate within a generation the natural capital assets of this ancient continent while other industries suffer, with no place in the future for what happens after the boom. So the Australian Greens stand entirely ready to work with anybody in this building and in the community for looking at ways of recreating our economy post-boom, but surely resourcing the community, resourcing the industries while the boom is in place with a properly constituted tax on the extraordinary profits that are still being raked out of the ground is an important place to start.